This episode and every episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show is brought to you by Ironmonger Brewing. Visit Ironmonger at their tap room in Marietta, Georgia, or online at ironmongerbrewing.com.
Open up a tab, grab a seat, and pour a pint. It's time for the Beer Guys Radio Show.
You want free beer? Go to the brewery.
Dedicated to the art, science, and enjoyment of craft beer.
Yeah, what's wrong with the beer we got?
Now, here are your hosts, Tim Dennis and Brian Hewitt.
Welcome to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We're broadcasting from the Beer Guys Radio Studios in Marietta, Georgia. And this week we're talking with Freeport, Maine's Maine Beer Company. With me, as always, is the man who once took a grizzly down with his bare hands, Brian Hewitt.
And it wasn't even that hard, Tim. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Joining us today, we have Dan Kleban, the co-owner and co-founder of Maine Beer Company. We're going to be talking about IPAs, of course, and doing what's right in craft beer. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Dan, we met not too long ago. You were in Atlanta for a brewer symposium down here. And you joined us here, or I joined you, actually. That's you. You were the guest. You spoke on a panel on IPA and one about breweries kind of giving back to their community there. So it was great to meet you. Had some good conversations there. And we'll cover a little bit more of what we talked about in the show today. But so we're sipping right now one of your beers, Dan, as we're known to do. We have your Mo. Can you tell us a little bit about this beer?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, and first, it was great to come down to Atlanta to talk to all those brewers and serve on that panel. I love getting out and talking and seeing other parts of the country and exciting things that are going on in craft beer. And you guys down there are kind of experiencing quite the renaissance here over the last couple of years. So you guys must be extremely excited.
We're in a good place right now. The last couple of years in Georgia, you could see by the new brewers at that conference just what's going on in the passion that people have here.
Yeah, and that's incredibly exciting for me to see. And so I had a great time down there. But Mo, getting back to your question, Mo is a beer that's kind of near and dear to my heart for a lot of different reasons. First and foremost, it's a beer that we named after I have twin 7-year-olds, Maddie and Ollie. So M-O is their namesake, and it's great walking into the grocery store because now they know that, and they'll see the beer Mo on the shelf, and they're like, "Hey,
it's our beer."
You're right.
That's when kids can say that, so they get a kick out of that. But as for the beer itself, the first beer we ever brewed was Peeper Ale, and back then, 10 years ago, we wanted to brew kind of a really hop-forward American-style pale ale, and Peeper was our take on that because 10 years ago in New England, those kind of beers just weren't being brewed. We have a very English ale tradition here in New England, and so we came out with this beer Peeper, which at the time was extremely hop-forward. And over the course of the years that kind of intervened, people's palates started to adjust and evolve and become more kind of hop accepting. And so to keep our pale ale in line with what, beer drinkers wanted to get out of their pale ale, we had to amp up the hop profile. So Mo was kind of the second iteration of a pale ale we did, which is just a little bit more hop forward, a little bit stronger, bolder pale ale, but still well within that kind of American tradition.
Yeah, it's very balanced. Like I'm not a big West Coast IPA guy. The super bitter beers and that. Brian and I fight about this. Total disagreement on that subject.
He's completely wrong. Yeah.
But I like a good balance. Give me a little bit of bitterness, a lot of hop flavor. I love hop flavor. So
balance is good.
Yeah, no, I think balance is really the hallmark of what I have always strived for when developing beers, and now, having kind of passed on recipe development to the brewing team here. It's kind of one of the hallmarks that I require of them. And so when I first set out as a home brewer and then as a more professional brewer, balance, I think, is really what I strive for. And while I really wanted to bring kind of American style hoppy ales to New England, I had tasted some of the few kind of beers in that style category that we could get here would be brewers like, Sierra Nevada, Stone, Rogue. We'd see some Bear Republic up here. And one, because we're way up, it is far northeast as you can get in this country, and in those states are obviously on the exact opposite coast. We always wouldn't get the freshest examples of those beers here. So we were like, look, I know what these beers probably tasted like when they're fresh, because they're still good, 30, 60, 90 days from when they were brewed. But I can only imagine what they would taste like fresh. So let's try to make these kind of beers fresh. But I also knew that while I liked the hoppiness of them, was great. What most people, I think, associate with IPAs or pale ales is, or when you call a beer hoppy, they think of bitter. And so any festival we go to, they'll be like, "Oh, is it hoppy?" And we're like, "Yeah, it's hoppy." "Oh, yeah, I don't like really bitter beers." We're like, "No, just taste this. Just trust me." Because when I say hoppy, what I mean is it's hop flavor and hop aroma forward. The back end balance. It's got enough bitterness to balance things out, but it's not a bracing.
Yeah, it's interesting trying all those beers, Dan, and seeing the different flavors profiles and the way people perceive those. Plus, like you mentioned, it takes a while for the sled dog teams to get those beers all the way up to you, doesn't it?
Snowmobiles, sled dogs,
yes,
reindeer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tim has definitely had that one chambered. I could just tell.
You knew I had that one.
Yes.
You got to use them when you can, Brian.
Yes,
you got to use them when you can. So, Brian, busy week for us here in Atlanta. We had a great time. Anniversary parties, grand openings, lots of good beers. We got a media preview of a beer that Monday night released earlier this week. Their Situational Ethics Stouts.
Indeed.
Went over to Contrast Artisan Ales, a new place there in Chamblee, Georgia.
It's a shiny place. It's a really nice,
very
beautiful
nice
little place.
Small tap room, very nice. They had a few beers on, not far from your neck of the hood, Brian.
Yeah, seriously, I could almost walk there.
Good stuff there, but we've actually got them scheduled for a show early next year. So Chase Medlin is the co-owner brewer. He'll be joining us. We stopped by Tappin' Six in Roswell, Georgia, which is a very cool beer bar. Becky, have you been by Tappin' Six before?
No, not yet.
I had not been, and I hate it that I hadn't been in a year because not far from me, but a very nice setting area, several beer taps there. They also have a cooler of canned and bottle offerings, and you can take them up to the counter. They're opening them up for you there.
Oh, that's cool. Small
food menu, and all of our cool friends showed up while we were there, Brian.
That's an exciting new thing we can do in Georgia. I think that a lot of places, I'm jealous of, could do that right along. I've been other places years ago where, just go open that one up. We can serve it to you right here at the bar.
Yeah, very cool. And you stopped by Sweetwater. They did the Resilience IPA launch, right?
Yeah, I saw that was happening. And again, Sweetwater's not far from me either. So I'm like, I can't not go to that. It was on the way to the situational ethics thing. So I went over, had the Resilience IPA, got to talk to Nick Knock and Nick B. And it's a solid beer. It tastes like a Sierra Nevada beer. It's a little bit of, actually, one of the Nicks was telling me it's a lot like their Celebration Ale. So it's a good beer. I encourage people to go out and drink it. And I think this week, in this past week, they actually had a pint night across the country for everybody to go out and buy some. But yes, they're donating all the proceeds to that. So if you want to support the cause, you got to go out and buy the beers. It's not just enough for the brewers to make them.
Good beer for a good cause.
Sure,
absolutely.
Sure. Tim, I think it's time for Truck and Taps Beers of the Week.
Crack open a cold one. It's the Truck and Tap Beer of the Week. Woo-hoo! Craft beer and food trucks in downtown Woodstock. Truckandtap.com.
Well, Brian, we've got a lot of great beers to sip on. You brought one in that we pre-gamed with today.
Yes.
The Harpoon Dunkin' Donut Coffee Porter. I knew you'd been wanting to try that. You've been trying for a few weeks to get us to open that up. So.
Yeah. You know how I am with coffee beers and crazy collabs. So
I've heard that Dunkin' coffee can be dangerous if you don't handle it properly.
I've heard that as well. Too much. I've heard that too
But that
often.
was a tasty stout. We also did a Berliner Weiss from one of our favorite brew pubs here in Georgia. I can say this. I can do this.
I believe in you.
Good Word Brewing. They have one called Anna Fantastic, which is a fruited sour, which is really good. We had that. And of course, Brian, we are getting into some Maine Beer Company beers. As we already mentioned, we have the Maine Beer Company Mo, which is our pale ale. We have their Woods and Waters, which is an IPA that they make with Maine-grown barley and wheat. And Brian, you got us a vintage King Titus here today, right?
Yeah, and
a 2016, right?
An accidentally cellared one from the last time I went up to the Carolinas, I think. Yeah.
Dan, how does a King Titus cellar? Is that we gonna enjoy that vintage King Titus?
You're gonna have to tell me.
Okay, we'll let you know soon then, man. We'll get into that. Absolutely. Well, Brian, why don't you let us know what's happening in the news?
What's in the news? The beer guys have the scoop.
Extra, extra!
Read all about it.
Time for headlines.
All right, so we have some huge industry-altering news this week. The brewing equipment manufacturer Diversified Metal Engineering, or DME, has gone bust. They were the largest and longest-running brewing equipment manufacturer in the business, and this is probably going to be millions of dollars lost for craft breweries all over, at least North America, possibly the world. They went under, basically owing the Royal Bank of Canada and other creditors somewhere between $13.5 million to, I saw things where they also owed an almost additional $30 million on top of it. So I don't know if they could be bailed out, but amongst the breweries affected by this, we have 10 Barrel, Anchorage Brewing, Lord Hobo, Maine Brewing Company, who we're talking to today, Monday Night, New Belgium, Tired Hands, and a bunch more. Though we happen to know that Monday Night Brewing's equipment was delivered just barely ahead of the announcement, so they may have gotten through unscathed, but it could mean dire consequences for these other breweries. Now, there is some hope that some of the completed, nearly done work may still be delivered, but there are no guarantees because they apparently have somebody or some people working on trying to complete those orders, even with the operation ceased. So no real explanation as to what happened, but
yeah, they had a lot of orders, and Dan, you actually Maine Beer Company got caught up in that, correct?
Yeah, we did. We had a couple pieces of equipment on order from them that we had deposits placed, and we've been working, kind of doing constant kind of emailing and phone calling up there to get info or any info we can, and the receiver, the firm that's kind of taken over operations. Is, I think, just really right now trying to collect data, trying to figure out where all these tanks, who they belong to, what the breweries have paid for them, et cetera. And I think that there is a glimmer of hope for probably a small number of lucky brewers where the projects will be brought to completion. But my kind of heart goes out to those brewers who projects won't be done, and especially those brewers whose equipment really was kind of their first brew house, and it sunk all of their initial seed money, their savings account, their IRAs, whatever, into it, and are never going to see it, and hence might not ever open up.
I know that there are at least two other breweries here in Atlanta that were hit by that. One said they have about $500,000 tied up in equipment. Their understanding is completed but hasn't shipped. Another one I don't know the status of, but for them it would have been their first brew house. And they're kind of seeing how it plays out right now. So, but a lot of brewers, and like you said, some of these young guys who it's their first equipment, it could end their brewery, if things don't.
Yeah, I know.
Kind of hit.
Yeah.
If this would have happened, so our first brew house was a 15-barrel DME system that we purchased back in 2010, and it was the first loan we ever took from a bank. And I can say definitively, if that money would have been lost. That project never delivered, and we owed the bank the money. That money, we never would have made it past a year.
Crazy stuff. Well, Brian, we have had some good discussion this first segment, so we're just sticking with your one hot news story this week.
It is the hottest news story.
It is the hottest news story. It's the big news. You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We're going to take a break, but we'll be back very soon to talk to Maine Beer Company.
Looking for a great way to promote your business? CedarStream has what you need. For apparel, stickers, signs, and banners, we're your one-stop shop. There are never any art fees or setup fees. And if you need your items quickly, there's no additional charge for rush orders. Whether you own a brewery, bar, bottle shop, or other business, CedarStream is ready to serve you. Visit cedarstream.com for more info or call 800-686-7488 for immediate assistance. CedarStream. We print America.
We are Reformation Brewery, celebrating the reformer in you. Locally crafted within the renowned Etowah watershed of Woodstock, Georgia, Reformation creates yeast-forward brews full of aroma and flavor crafted to last. Come see us in beautiful Woodstock, Georgia, for a tour and tasting of unique brews that you can't find anywhere else. Reformation Brewery, set beer free. ReformationBrewery.com.
Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Cannonball coming.
Now, back to the Beer Guys radio show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys radio show. We're talking with Dan Kleban of Maine Beer Company.
Dan, once again, thank you for joining us. We do appreciate it, and hope everything works out with that DME issue. I know there's a lot of people waiting to find out, so hopefully it gets worked out, man. So we just opened your Woods and Waters here. Can you tell us a bit about that beer?
Yeah, it's got kind of a cool backstory to it. In 2016, we have a large tract of land in the north woods of Maine that a group of folks was trying to get protected as a national park and or a national monument. And that finally, through many years of effort, and that finally happened in August of 2016. Then President Obama designated Katahdin Woods and Waters as a national monument. So we now have 2 national parks and national monuments in Maine. And so I was involved in that effort to get that designated and protected. And we decided to make a beer to commemorate that landmark event. And so hence the name Woods and Waters. And so when I was developing the recipe, one, I knew I wanted to use Maine-sourced ingredients in it. And I also, thinking of the outdoors and in the large, pine forests that we have up here, wanted to rely on some hops that definitely give more of that kind of that piney, really, or more kind of grapefruit citrusy flavor and aroma to it. So it's a heavy Simcoe beer. Because I think that hop really represents those flavors and aromas. So it was an ode to commemorate that moment and try to encapsulate a little bit of Maine in a glass.
Yeah, that's something, Dan. Most people don't think of Maine, agriculturally like that with barley growing. And do you have a lot of local grain options there?
We do. So we're incredibly fortunate in the sense that northern Maine is a very large state geographically, very small population-wise, but a vast tract of northern Maine is farmed for potatoes, and in rotation with potatoes, because potatoes take they really kind of deplete the soil of nutrients. Farmers up there will rotate barley in to help the soil recover because barley isn't as nutrient intensive. So there's a long history of barley growing up in our northern counties.
That is so convenient when you think about it, because that means you have a lot of potatoes around for poutine, but then you have a lot of barley around for beer. Oh my goodness. This might be the most amazing climate I've ever heard of.
And for people who are totally lost, when we were on break, we were chatting about Maine and Atlanta and poutine and that. So which it's not surprising if Brian just came out of nowhere with that, but there was a reason for that question.
And there's really no better combination, let's be honest, than duck fat fried potatoes, gravy, cheese curds, and beer.
You want to meet up after the show, Dan, and grab some? I think it sounds like a plan.
Yes. Speaking of the Woods and Waters, getting back away from poutine, as hard as that is, you got a nice placement on that in the it's the VinePair's top 50 beers of 2018. I just want to say congratulations for hitting that list, and you were right behind Dry Fontenen's Ode Goose with Woods and Waters, which is pretty impressive. That's
high praise, no doubt.
Yeah, and it's a tasty beer. So
this seems like a good time to mention, Brian, that we are currently holding the Best of Georgia Beer Awards right now.
Oh, we are.
Voting is open through Christmas Day. We have over 2,000 Georgia beer fans that have voted so far. So if you haven't cast your vote, get out there and do it. We've got Best Brewery, Best Brew Pub. We tossed in a Best Home Brewer category this year. This is our 3rd annual Best of Georgia Beer Awards. We get really excited about it, and that's going to be on next week's show. So if you haven't voted, go to beerguysradio.com and cast your vote.
Absolutely. Definitely should do that. So you know what? Let's get back to the beginning, actually. Let's talk about what led you to opening up Maine Beer Company.
Sure. I graduated law school in 2007, and my wife and I went to law school in Boston, and my wife and I we decided we wanted to move back to Maine. So I moved back to Maine, and really shortly thereafter, there was a partner at the law firm where I was working who really introduced me to craft beer generally. And he and I'd go over to his house and we drink all these cool beers, not just American craft beer, but really the really cool beers that are brewed in Belgium and really around the world. And out of that grew an invitation from him to come help him, be an apprentice home brewer. So I took him up on that. So one afternoon I went over and he's like, "Hey, you want to help me brew?" I realized that when he says help him brew, it meant that I clean everything up.
The guest grain out.
The guest grain out, in keeping with tradition.
So anybody who thinks that brewing is a glamorous profession is sorely mistaken. It's really glamorous janitorial work. So he taught me how to brew, and I really just caught the bug. And so I started home brewing at home, and it's cliched, but really, our brewery grew out of my garage, and literally, my brother and I would hang out on the weekends and brew beer, drink beer. Sometimes drink, too much beer and screw the beer up, which I'm sure every home brewer has done in their day. But in 2009, a weird confluence of events happened. The financial collapse happened in late 2008, early 2009. And it opened my eyes to really how a large segment of our economy was really letting down Americans. And so while I loved brewing, my brother and I decided, look, let's try to start a company that we're going to make beer because that's what we really like to make. But let's really try to start a company that shows that companies can act in a responsible manner, and they don't have to crash the economy. They can treat the planet well, treat their communities well, treat their employees well, and make a profit. And lo and behold, we could prove that actually by being just good people, we could do better. We could, you could be even a more prosperous company. So we decided that we kind of blend our passion for making beer with this experiment to try to create a company that could serve as a model to others. And really from day one, that has been our guiding light. Our goal is to not only try to make the best beer that we possibly can, the most quality and consistent beer, but to try to show other small businesses across the country that, you don't have to do it the way that you think you have to do it. You can really be a good person and a good employer, and respect your planet and the community and your employees. And lo and behold, that's really good for the bottom line too.
So that kind of works into your corporate philosophy, or at least what I see on all of your bottles, the do what's right. That's what you're talking about there effectively, right?
Yeah. I mean, so when we were my brother and I were putting our business plan together, we kind of came up with that motto of do what's right. And I think what our belief is that I think intuitively most human beings, they know if they're being honest with themselves, deep down in their gut, they know what the right decision is in any given situation. They don't always choose it. So that's where do what's right sprung out of, is just, if people just kind of went with their heart, went with their gut, the world would be a much better place. And I'm not trying to be Pollyannish here, but I do think that, we really need to change the attitudes of people and show that companies can actually be forces of good in the world as opposed to forces of recklessness. And so, that is where do what's right, sprung out of.
Sometimes the thing that is not right is a lot more enjoyable and easier to do. It's not always easy to do what's right. I've done wrong things a lot of times and had a good time doing it. It wasn't the right decision to make.
Being naughty can be convenient sometimes, Tim.
It can. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Well, the do what's right, Dan, that goes into everything. It's not just a catchphrase. Again, we talk some here in Atlanta about it. But from the way you run your company and handle your employees and all that, it's kind of a philosophy all around, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a guiding principle, right? It's what drives decision making in our company. So whether it's our commitment to the environment, from day one, we've always kicked back 1% of all of our top line revenue. So even when we weren't making a profit, we were donating 1% of our revenue to environmentally focused nonprofits. It's providing full health care coverage to our employees, providing a wage that's almost double the Maine minimum wage to all of our employees, paid time off, and just being good people. At the end of the day, I think there's a lot of good people around, and I think if people just kind of acted on their kind of instincts, I think the world would be a much better place. So we try to walk. Not only do we talk the talk, we really try to walk the walk.
Walk the walk as well. Well, Dan, we need to take another break. When we get back, we're going to talk to you some about 1% for the planet. You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show, and we will be right back after this.
Are you thinking about opening a brewery in the Atlanta area? If so, take a look at the Park at Georgetown. This unique community will feature a collection of restaurants as well as a craft brewery within the new J.W. Holmes luxury development, Dunwoody Green. Conveniently located less than half a mile from I-285, this enclave of restaurants will be the gathering place in Dunwoody. Krim & Associates, the developer of the Park at Georgetown, wants to talk to you. For more information, call Todd Semrau at 404-226-6526.
Looking for a great way to promote your business? CedarStream has what you need. For apparel, stickers, signs, and banners, we're your one-stop shop. There are never any art fees or setup fees. And if you need your items quickly, there's no additional charge for rush orders. Whether you own a brewery, bar, bottle shop, or other business, CedarStream is ready to serve you. Visit cedarstream.com for more info or call 800-686-7488 for immediate assistance. CedarStream. We print America.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. I want to give a quick shout out to one of our newest radio affiliates, WBQO 93.7 FM in Brunswick, Georgia. Catch Beer Guys Radio on WBQO every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern. We're talking with Dan Kleban of Maine Beer Company.
Dan, we just opened up a vintage King Titus here, so we are enjoying it. It's 2 years old, Brian. Is that right? 2016 on this one?
I believe
did you
so.
say?
I think it might be April of 2016. So it's
okay.
even
2.5-ish,
yeah,
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But we're enjoying it. It's got a little bit of the vintage, a little cellar taste to it, but there's a very nice roast on the front end, a very milk chocolate, both flavor and kind of mouthfeel in the finish. So can you tell us a little more about old King Titus here?
Sure. Yeah. So we're a brewery that, is really known for kind of making American style hoppy ales. But I know me personally and a lot of folks, across the country that enjoy craft beer, enjoy the darker beers. And so King Titus was one of our first forays into, a darker beer. And when consumed fresh, it's definitely going to have much more of a hop punch. Porters, I think what differentiates them from a stout is the level of hop presence there. But I wanted to brew kind of our American take on a porter. So I'm glad you're still getting the roasty, chocolatey notes. That's definitely a beer that's designed to present those flavors and stuff. And King Titus, a little bit of a backstory on the name. For those folks who are into the gorillas, King Titus is one of the most famous gorillas to have ever lived, and Diane Fossey, in all of her research on gorillas, did a lot of research on him. And Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund is an environmental nonprofit that we support here, that does a lot of work over in Africa, protecting gorillas. My brother has an infatuation with the gorillas, if you're wondering why.
Okay.
So we happen to know a guy that is very into monkeys.
We know a monkey scientist.
We know a monkey
He's a brewer now, though.
Yeah,
he's a brewer
now.
Brian once mistakenly called a chimp an ape or something along that. It didn't go well.
Yeah.
It did not go well. It wasn't taken well at all. And you mentioned to us, you don't do a lot of beers that are, or you don't really do beers that are meant to cellar age, so you don't get a lot of feedback on vintage Maine Beer Company beers, correct?
No, we don't. It's good. No, not at all. In fact, on our bottles, we're pretty emphatic. Drink fresh. We date code all our bottles. Drink within 90 days. So it's good to get some feedback as to how, especially the darker beers, which I think a little bit of aging can actually be kind of complementary to. It's good to hear how they're tasting.
Have you ever considered making a beer that was intended to sit down like that? Like, going against I guess it's kind of your whole scheme of things, but you ever think about that? Some of the big barrel aged things, or just a big, huge stout that you think would age well, or is that just not in the cards for you up at Maine?
We've done a little bit of that on a super small scale, like tasting room only type stuff. Doing imperial stouts and things that can definitely be set down for a while. But in terms of production beers that we're scaling up and distributing, we haven't done that. I think part of our philosophy is not to be kind of a jack of all trades, but focus on doing a few things and really try to do them really, really well. That doesn't mean you can't keep things interesting and do different things. But we really try to stay focused on the styles of beers that we think we're good at making, really.
And that's one thing that we were going to mention to you, Dan, is we noticed that your portfolio is fairly tight. Untapped shows 16 beers for you, which for a brewery at 10 years old, we know some that released that many this month, literally released that many beers this month. So have you ever been tempted to do a raspberry milkshake double glitter lunch? No, not at all.
Even in the tap room on the sly?
No. But that's an interesting point you make, and there was a really good article in the craft beer blog sphere that came out fairly recently on that very point. And I think that the industry has changed. Frankly, we're still a relatively young brewery in that we're not even 10 years old yet. But in terms of beer years, we're actually kind of old. And given when we opened up, there were still less than 2,000 brewers in the United States. There's over 7,000 now. And the business models have shifted. The days of having that kind of core brand of beers that you could sell outside of not only your city or town, but outside of your state to other states, that business model doesn't really exist anymore. So breweries that open now, they rely on on-premise sales, tasting room sales, and in order to keep customers coming to their tasting room and buying their beers, they're finding that they're constantly having to innovate and come up with new reasons for the beer drinker to walk through their door. Hence, you have brewers who are making hundreds of brands every year.
One thing we've seen here in Georgia, and I got pushed back on this when I mentioned it earlier this year, and the way I stated it was kind of meant to gouge some people, get them going. I just said Georgia brewers are releasing too many beers. And then I expanded from there. And the thing is you get a point of saturation where you can affect excitement. You want people to be excited for every release that comes out. You want people to enjoy those. And if you have seriously 15 releases in a month, the excitement's not going to be there as much.
I'm overdosing on dopamine over here, Tim. I mean, that's what's happening.
You dopamine over there?
Yeah, that's what that is. Right?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So you just get kind of blasé to it.
Exactly.
So keep it fresh, keep stuff coming, keep it interesting. But if you're releasing that many beers to where it's just hammering the market and people don't know, it's a blur. It goes by and people just don't notice it at all because you're releasing so many things. So keep it exciting, keep it going, but pace yourselves.
Yeah,
I think that's right. I think every brewer, every brewery owner, they're going to do what they need to do to survive. Right? That's just instinct. And so I would never begrudge any brewery owner's decision. They're going to do what they do to have to keep the doors open. But I do agree. I think your point is well taken. That there's going to come a point, I think, where the marketplace, that is beer drinkers, are going to start to settle back in to the beers that they like and that they can rely on. And I would advise, brewers out there to find a couple beers that they're consistently churning out that are consistent and that those beer drinkers can rely on.
Yeah, because these breweries, and I'll say, I do not own a brewery. I just sit around and run my mouth about beer and breweries.
That's right.
So if there's breweries that are consistently releasing this many, it's obviously working for them to do that. They're obviously selling them. They're getting people coming in. And it is nice to go to a tap room at one of my new favorite breweries. Been going there for years, but they've revamped Atlanta Brewing Company.
Yes.
And you go to the tap room, they have 20 taps. There's always something new and exciting on the tap wall there.
Yeah.
So that I do enjoy that. And, if you're a brewer that's doing it, it's obviously working for you. Hopefully it's working for you.
Let's be honest with ourselves. The craft beer revolution is really all about innovation. I mean, that's why we are exciting. That's why we exist. It is to innovate and push the envelope. So I don't begrudge any brewer who, I know we can mock the glitter, raspberry infused vanilla and IPA. Some of the things obviously go over the rail, and they're just meant to get attention from people. But innovation is really what built this industry. So I think I think there's a fine line, but innovation is a good thing.
We drank a glitter beer a couple weeks ago, and have to say that it was a fairly tasty beer.
Yeah.
But it was a charity collaboration that Moon River Brewing did, and of course a gimmick. You tell people you got a glitter, but it was still a solid beer. It wasn't just about the glitter. Brian.
I mean, I could totally taste the glitter.
You could taste the glitter.
The glitter tones. Those glitter tones were amazing.
Yeah.
And you do a fair amount of. So we've talked about you having just 16 beers on tap, but you actually have a fair number of new things come through the tap room too, right? I mean, you do some one-offs occasionally. Is it pretty much a constant thing, or is that just an occasional thing?
No, it's a constant thing.
Okay.
But we'll never have. But we rarely will we have more than kind of one or two, what we'll call like pilot beers on at a time.
Okay.
But definitely, it's good for the brewers here to kind of, flex their creative muscles and get to try to make new beers. And, and we see brewers that have been around for 30 years or so, who have lost relevance, and that's the last thing that you want to happen to your brand, right? And so you have to always be looking at things fresh, or else you're before you know it, the day is going to come, and you're going to be irrelevant. Your brands are going to be kind of just played out and bland, and you've always got to be thinking about that innovation. So we do a ton of test brewing, pilot brewing, tasting room only beers. To keep things fresh.
It's always nice to see the new stuff, but not too much new stuff.
Not too much.
Got to control it. You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We do need to take a break, but we promise to talk about 1% for the planet when we get back.
We are Reformation Brewery, celebrating the reformer in you. Locally crafted within the renowned Etowah watershed of Woodstock, Georgia, Reformation creates yeast-forward brews full of aroma and flavor crafted to last. Come see us in beautiful Woodstock, Georgia, for a tour and tasting of unique brews that you can't find anywhere else. Reformation Brewery. Set beer free. ReformationBrewery.com.
It's Brian and Tim, the Beer Guys. If you're like us, no lunch or dinner is complete without a pint or two of craft beer.
Which is why Truck and Tap in downtown Woodstock and Alpharetta are always on our list. Tim, why do they call it Truck and Tap?
Well, the tap part is easy, Brian. They've got 18 of them.
As for the truck part, that's where it gets interesting. Truck and Tap features your favorite Atlanta area food trucks daily, so that way you're getting a different menu every day.
Truck and Tap in downtown Woodstock, Alpharetta, and coming soon to Duluth in 2018. Truckandtap.com. Let them know that the Beer Guys sent you.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
He hates these cans! Stay away from the cans!
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/beerguys. Patrons can get some cool perks like Beer Guys swag and commercial-free episodes. Now back to our conversation with Dan Kleban of Maine Beer Company.
Dan, we are currently drinking an Untitled Art Neapolitan Stout. Can you tell us about this beer?
Absolutely not, but I'd be happy to listen.
Okay. Yeah, so we ran out of Maine Beer Company beers. We got this. You get all the Neapolitan flavors in this.
Definitely.
Good stout. I get a lot of the strawberry really hits
Right
in
on the
that.
nose.
So, well, Dan, I want to keep a promise we made at the end of the second segment of the show where we said we were going to talk about 1% for the plan. And then we went on with other subjects that just kind of flowed for us. So one thing you're big on that was part of when you started your brewery and your company is a program called 1% for the Planet. Can you tell us about what that is?
Sure. Yeah. So 1% for the Planet is it's an organization that was founded several years ago by the founder of Patagonia Outerwear, who happens to be a Maine native, Yvon Chouinard. In his vision was that if all small businesses, all large and small businesses, donated a small fraction, i.e. 1% of their sales to helping to save, clean, protect the environment, then we'd be setting ourselves up and be in a really good spot in terms of living in a healthy and safe planet. And so what he's encouraged other small businesses to do is to take the pledge to donate 1% of their revenue and donate it to qualifying environmental nonprofits. And so when we were starting our company, I talked earlier in the show about what our mission was. This seemed to us to be a real tangible way that we could show that not only, was our motto, do what's right, asking others to do what's right, but it was a real tangible way for us to show that Maine Beer Company was really putting its money where its mouth is. And we really believe deep down in our hearts that, everybody, businesses, large and small, individuals, organizations, we all really need to pitch in for the collective good. And so from day one, we've donated 1% of our sales to a variety of local and international environmental nonprofits. And we also, invest heavily in solar energy here on site and recycling all of our organic waste to try to minimize our impact on our communities.
I'm intrigued by the solar panels because I like all the interesting new technology, the LEDs, the solar panels. I wish I had some of my own. I'm kind of curious how much of the power that you use at the brewery comes from the solar panels. And obviously that has to be affected by some of the, the weather you might be getting now with the snow and the clouds and whatnot, right?
Well, sure. I mean, Maine, we're not ideally situated on the planet in terms of being able to efficiently harvest solar, but we get plenty of sunshine up here. Not this time of year. It's dark here at about 4:00. So you drive to work in the dark and you drive home in the dark. But to your question, we just underwent a fairly large expansion here in the last year. Prior to that, we had our solar installation would offset roughly half of our energy consumption. And those familiar with breweries, have worked in breweries, we are, there's a lot of heavy machinery, big pumps and everything operating here. So we do suck quite a bit of energy out of our outlets. Now that we've expanded, we've expanded the brewing operation and kind of piggybacking on that in the coming years, we'll be adding to our solar capacity so that we can kind of get back up to that similar level of offset.
Well, this is, tying into the 1% for the planet, doing things that are environmentally responsible. The 1%, and this is something we talked about, Dan, when you were here in Atlanta. 1% makes it easy for anybody to make this a part of their business plan out of the gate, because if you're only doing a small percent, you only have to donate a small percent, and that can grow with your company. So it's something that any business, if they feel it's overwhelming, I guess, to get into, there's room for anyone to do this type of thing.
Sure. I mean, yeah. So, and that's really the cool thing about one thing that I really like about the 1% is the bigger we grow, the more beer we sell. That 1% in dollars and cents wise becomes bigger too. So it's a donation that grows with your operation. And we as brewers, I can't overemphasize the fact. I mean, I understand that climate change can be a political, hot potato, but we rely on agricultural products, hops, barley, and clean water. And if any industry should be leading on making sure that we have access to those ingredients, it's us. It's us brewers. So I think it's really important, not, I believe, kind of personally, it's important, for me and my kids and my grandkids to live in a safe planet. But just from a business standpoint, we as brewers should be standing up and really be concerned about our raw materials and how they're being affected by changes in the climate.
Right. And we talked about like the woods and waters using local grain. That's more than just supporting the local farmer. When you don't have to truck grain from across the country or cargo ship from the other side of the world, it lessens the impact on the planet using this. The closer your raw ingredients are to home, the better it is for the planet. You're not just doing it to say, hey, we're local, we're farm to glass here. There are benefits to it outside of just being able to offer a local product.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the closer to home that we can source our ingredients, the better, for a lot of reasons. One of which is obviously, kind of the carbon footprint that, tractor trailers or trains will leave when they're shipping barley across the country as opposed to from just down the road. But it's also keeping money in the local economy, and supporting local farmers who go out and are able to, grow their businesses locally, and you has kind of this virtuous cycle within your community of keeping the dollars at home. So there's a lot of benefits to it.
So the 1% for the planet is kind of like a guideline, but you still need to choose the individual charities you support, right?
Yeah. So the way it operates is we make a pledge to 1% for the planet. We're going to be a participating business owner, brewery, it could be any kind of business. And we're allowed to use, their logo and, promote the fact that we're doing this. But in return, and then we can then go out and donate money to any qualifying environmental nonprofit. And what I mean by qualifying is that 1% organization has to look at the organization and say, yeah, they're legit. This isn't, a shadow operation or whatever. They have to make sure they're a legit environmental nonprofit. And then to verify that we're in fact making the donations, living up to our claims, we submit our tax return to them every single year and the receipts to all the approved environmental nonprofits, just so there's that verification and authentication process to make sure that we're not lying, so that the customers can know, they can feel secure in knowing that, yeah, we're in fact supporting a company that's actually doing the right thing.
One thing I could see as a challenge here, and I guess you've addressed this somewhat here, Dan, through the 1% for the planet and kind of, checking these companies out. But as a business, especially if you're one that's well known for charitable giving, you're going to have a lot of people contacting you to help them out. We've seen it with breweries here and other businesses. What is a good, how do you choose which companies you support?
So, a lot of it is just kind of either me or my brother or employee it comes up with a local organization that we think is just doing really, really good work. But getting back to your kind of point of, you will get hit up by a lot of nonprofit or charitable organizations, and we learned that early on. And one, another reason why we kind of chose to focus on 1% is it does focus our giving efforts. That's not to say that we don't give to organizations that aren't environmentally focused. We certainly do, but allows you as a company to kind of focus your giving in an area that you have a particular passion for. And so that, I think that's another benefit of 1% is really focused giving. And if people come to us and they would like us to give them money, we'll say, look, are you a 1% for the planet member? And if they say no, we'll say, well, this is really how we focus our giving. And you can't say yes to everybody. But I imagine every company is going to have their different focus. It doesn't always have to be the environment. It could be something else, but it makes it easy as a business to make those giving decisions when it can be focused.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, we're just about out of time for the show here, but is there anything else you'd like folks to know about Maine Beer Company?
No, I think we covered a lot of good ground here. And, I just want to say again, I'm honored to be on the show. Thank you, Tim, Brian, Becky, Sam, whoever else is on here. I love talking about beer, love talking about our company, and we're just part of a great community here that I think is really unique.
Well, thank you much, Dan. We've really enjoyed having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. If folks want to learn more about Maine Beer Company, your beers, and what you're doing, what is the best way for them to do that?
MaineBeerCompany.com.
There you go. Easy enough. Check it out.
Best way is come to Maine.
We're going to wait till the weather gets a little better, though. We've heard how it is. It's dark at 4:00 and cold and snowy.
Needs
We're going to stay in Atlanta
first,
for now. Yeah, but we'll come up and visit. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. That about wraps it up for this episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show. This is our last episode before Christmas, y'all.
Oh,
Christmas is coming up. So everybody, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. Now, our next episode, Brian, is one of my favorites of the year. It is the Best of Georgia Beer show that we were talking about.
Yes.
So come tune in for that. For more craft beer info, make sure to follow us online. We are Beer Guys Radio on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast. You'll get extended episodes like this one where we can't fit it all on the radio show. Make sure to check that out. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great week, and don't forget to drink local. Cheers.
The Beer Guys Radio Show on the Beer Guys Radio Network. BeerGuysRadio.com.